I want to talk to you about a critical element of happiness, success, and overcoming obstacles: resilience, and how it's built through some of the most painful moments. Perspective sometimes requires partnership and perseverance. And understand, sometimes it gets hard, and it's tough, and it's painful. You get tired, you get weak, and when you don't know how to keep going, sometimes all the strength you need is the strength to ask others for help. I was a victim, but refused to own being a victim. You get that subtle distinction, that difference between past and present tense? That gives us power. Power to change the way we think, power to change our circumstances, and ultimately power to overcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me tonight on Real Talk with Jean Price. I am really excited about tonight's show. We have a wonderful topic with, staying in that vein of some things we're going to be talking about from the inside out. And tonight is no different. We're actually going to be talking about out with the old and in with the new. And of course, I have a wonderful guest that's going to be on the show tonight. She is no stranger to real talk, always brings value, always brings something that we can take with us. I like to call that, we oftentimes with this particular guest, I have an aha moment, right? I have one of those moments where it's like, whoa, she just said what? Can you repeat what? So I love that, because those are the times where you can take that and you can download it within yourself. You could go back, you could think about it. It becomes your takeaway. And that's what real talk is really all about, having those discussions, those topics, those conversations where we can walk away from something, but yet get so much from it, right? So I'm excited about tonight's show, and I am elated to have my guest come out tonight. Help me welcome to my viewing audience, help me welcome Dr. Tay to Real Talk with Jean Price.
Hi, Lady Price. How are you? As always, it's a blessing to be here with you.
Wow, thank you. As always, as you said, well, always, you always accept, always find a way to kind of get you there. But one of our production managers said we need to maybe make this a monthly visit or something. But I agree, because I think
I'm for it.
Thank you. Because I think brain is something that we really need. And I think that's important. But Dr. Tay, why don't you introduce yourself to those that don't know you, and let's hear a little bit about you.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Tay Bassett. I am a psychologist, professor, and author, and I am so happy to be here. I posted on Facebook, gems are always dropped when me and Lady Price get together. Always.
Yeah. And a lot of times it comes from her. She just don't want to say that part yet.
Not true at all. Because I think you had me in tears last time. I mean,
a little something like that. Yeah. So Dr. Tay, we're going to get into this discussion. Oh my gosh, I have so much that I want to talk about tonight, because I think it's just where I'm at. It's just, and that doesn't sound probably correct where I'm at, but it's where my life is going, is where I am sitting in this moment in time, right? So I've been studying Kairos and Chronos, qualitative and quantitative, really in like vasting in this moment. Sometimes we call it a season of life. And I want to talk about that. I want to open up our discussion. Let's talk about the season of life that you're in.
So it's interesting you ask, because I think lately I've really been assessing that. And like you said, just sitting with it and basking in it. And one thing that I tell clients when they're dealing with difficult emotions, I tell them to allow themselves to experience it, but not be overcome by it. And I think I'm in the experience, but don't be overcome by it season of my life. I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time I was on, but in January, I pretty much uprooted me and my children, and we moved to another state. So I had closed on the home over a year ago, but due to circumstances, we weren't able to fully move. So we were only here on the weekend.
Wow.
But in January, doors opened and I was like, let's do it. It's time. And we moved to Connecticut and we're living here full time now.
Wow.
So because I'm in this new space, new surroundings, new people, limited support system locally, like, my support system in New York is strong.
Right.
I'm constantly thinking, okay, God, what's the point?
Right.
What's the point of this experience? What's
Yeah.
why are you putting me in this situation? So I'm allowing myself to experience the things, the situations, the feelings, but
Mm.
not be overcome by them.
Yeah. I have to thank you for that because I was actually on the phone with really one of my dear best friends today, and she said that almost the same verbatim words that you said.
Mm,
She went through something yesterday, Dr. Tay, and it was almost defeating, if I can use that. And this morning I checked on her. You know what she said? Almost what you said. She said she allowed herself to feel that moment of this is not going to work out. This is not what it's supposed to be. But I love the fact that I respect her even more because she said she allowed herself to feel it. Why is it, Dr. Tate, that sometimes we reject the allowance of feeling something that's actually okay to feel, but not take complete ownership of it?
it
Why?
hurts.
Let's talk about that.
It hurts.
Yes. Yes.
It
Yeah.
hurts because once we learn that the stove is hot,
Mhm.
we're not going to willingly go back and touch it.
Yeah.
Not knowing that sometimes you have to revisit and allow yourself to experience the pain, the hurt, the shame, the guilt, the frustration, etc., in order to heal from it.
Mm.
Because when we don't allow ourselves to feel, we stuff the feelings. And that purse, you keep
Yeah.
stuffing stuff in it, and it's like it must have a bottom, no bottom, because
Yeah.
eventually it's going to burst
Yes.
because you're overfilling it. So when you stuff your emotions and you kind of ignore them and avoid them,
Mhm.
they are going to come out, and most often it's going to be in a not healthy way. It might be in the form of a
Right.
breakdown or an outburst or you lashing out on somebody who didn't do anything to you. So that's why it's important, but that's also why people avoid it
Right,
oftentimes.
right. You mentioned in the opening when you were kind of introducing yourself, you're in a new season. Can you kind of share with us how did you get to the place that you went out with the old and you said, okay, I'm in the new, trusting God all the way through that though, right? Knowing that He's there and He's got your steps and your steps are ordered. When did you know and how did you accomplish that new season though?
You know what? It vacillates between, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to step out on faith, and between that and, okay, maybe I made the wrong decision.
Hmm.
Maybe I didn't hear God. And I'm being completely transparent because sometimes
Love it.
we think we're good until we're not.
Mhm.
But honestly, God showed me a person who was going to be part of my support system.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, all right. So he showed me someone because one of my fears was that I wouldn't have childcare when I was working, the days that I was commuting.
Mhm.
So once he showed me the person, I'm like, okay, all right. So once, the other piece of the puzzle is put into place, then I'll be able to move forward. And literally, so, there was a situation with my job where I didn't think that I could be out of the state and still see clients.
Oh, wow.
So one day, so God had revealed that, and I was just like, all right,
Mhm.
I'm at my desk, and it's one of those days where it's just like, I just want to be in bed. I want to
Right,
go back home, put the covers over my head, not even watch TV. Just,
right, right. Mhm.
it was a rough day. And something, which I now know was the Holy Spirit, said, call the Department of Education for New York State, the office. So I'm like, all right. And I called, and they picked up on the first ring. And anyone who's called the state for anything,
Right, you gonna wait. Yes.
so I was like, okay, there's something to this.
Right.
Long story short, what I thought was a no became a yes.
Oh, wow.
And that is what opened the door. So I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't completely my faith, but all we need is what?
Mm.
All we need is the mustard seed. I had the mustard seed.
it.
I might have been, kind of
Yeah, yeah.
jumping double dutch, but I had the mustard seed. And because I had the mustard seed, God was the increase.
Mm-hmm.
He watered that seed
What are
on
they?
that day. So I
Right.
think it was the faith plus the works, me doing the work that was necessary to lay the foundation. And then that's when I was like, okay, it's time.
Mm.
And just because it's time doesn't mean it's not going to be tough.
Okay. Say that one more time. 'Cause see, listen to my audience. This is what I'm telling you. This is what she does every time she comes on the show. I have to have her repeat something. Say that again. That was so powerful.
Just because it's time doesn't mean it's not going to be tough. So
Mm.
you can be in your time and, oftentimes, especially in churches, oh, it's your season. There's a whole song about it. It's a new
Right.
season, right? Just because it's your season doesn't mean it's not going to be tough. It's just like healing.
Yeah.
It's necessary, but it doesn't always feel good.
Right. Right.
Emotionally, physically, even scabs, they get itchy, they might start to, but that's part of the healing process. So I knew it was time,
Mhm.
but that didn't mean that it was without, obstacles.
Right.
But the trials come to make you stronger. So I sometimes I'm like, wait, I'm here practically by myself. I have my neighbor, but
Mhm.
I don't really know her like that. But
Mhm.
like I'm here by myself. Was that me, or was that flesh, or was that God?
Mhm. Mhm.
But then I go back to how God opened the doors.
Okay. Okay.
And it's just like, okay. So it comes with its challenges, but
It
that
does.
doesn't mean it's not the right time.
Right. That is so powerful because, you're right. Sometime in our own minds, Dr. Tay, we hear it's our voice, and it is hard to um, ascertain whether you're really hearing from God or is it just you having your own personal thoughts, and
Right.
yet can walk out on something and try to, because I worked at Winthrop Hospital for 26 years, right? And I knew that it was at that moment, it was a certain time. I said, you know what? I was talking to one of the young ladies there and I was ministering to her. I said, you're going to be the last person I minister to. I knew it. Like I felt it in my heart. But to your point, it wasn't tough to take the step or the leap, but it was tough to figure out, okay, did I really hear from God in this?
Mhm.
And it was really, really a tough faith walk for me because everything around me didn't feel like it was lining up with what I felt God was saying to me. When I look at it now, and because if I was still there, it'd be 34 years in, I wouldn't be traveling internationally and, doing the things I did with my documentary and so forth and so on. But I'm so appreciative of you saying that, and to the viewing audience, I appreciate Dr. Tay saying that. I want you to write something in the chat because I heard transparency on that. I think all of you can relate to there are times when we kind of feel the time, but yet the time is still tough. And thank you for sharing that. So let's go a little deeper, Dr. Tay. So you're in this season and you're doing what you're doing. How did you navigate through just getting through some of the traumas? Like everything doesn't come easy, and we all know that.
Mhm.
I'll just say one of the things I know about Dr. Tay is that she went through a weight loss season in her life. She looks absolutely fabulous, by the way.
Thank
But
you.
again, what did you do to get through that? Because I found that sometimes, well, let me use not myself because I'm a little on the smaller side, but sometimes weight is associated with what we're going through.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that a little bit because somebody could really be struggling with that. How did you figure that part out?
Well, this time around, when I lost the weight, it was because I wanted to, because I saw the need. I established my why. And again, it was time to lose the weight, but it doesn't mean it wasn't tough, right? But the first time I lost 35 pounds in a year, but it was stress weight.
Okay.
So this time around, with regard to the weight loss and like this season, it was empowering
Mm,
because I said so. It wasn't, I wasn't again succumbing to what was going on around me. I was making a decision for myself to do something. So it wasn't, I think this time it's different because it's about me. The
mm,
weight loss before was about what was going on around me and how I was responding to it.
So good. So you took full control of your life, so to speak, even though we know God is really in control. You took control of it and you went and you walked down in it. You said something that was really powerful. You established your why.
Mhm. Yep.
How can other people establish their why? How can they recognize the why?
First, you have to assess. And this is something that I said to a client not long ago. You're doing this and you're doing that. But when you sit down and think about it, assess why you're doing it.
Mm,
Because sometimes we just go through the motions and,
yeah,
because that's what we've been trained to do. That's what we've been taught to do. That's what we saw people around us doing. But we don't know why we're doing it.
right.
Think about church. Like there's so many church traditions.
Yes.
Why does Big Mama sit on that corner in that pew? She might not even know. You know what I mean? There's so many things that we do,
So true.
but we're not aware of the why. So we have to really give ourselves the time to sit
Mhm,
still
mhm.
and assess the why. Sometimes we have to assess the why, sometimes we have to establish it because the why is going to motivate us. So like with the weight loss, I
Yeah.
had to establish my why.
Okay.
I had to put my why on my refrigerator.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that was my motivation. But
Yeah.
sometimes when we're like experiencing emotions and going through situations and we don't know why, that's when we have to establish. I mean,
Okay.
we have to assess the why.
Yes. Okay. That's excellent. That's really good. That's good. You know, in the video clip that we saw, something that was said was so powerful. I had to write it down. Resilience is built in some of the most painful moments. My goodness.
Absolutely.
Can you relate to what was said in the video clip and why?
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely. In different phases of my life, in different places of my life,
Mhm.
I might have thought in that time, how am I gonna make it through?
Yeah.
Rather not how, but speaking death to the situation and saying, "I'm not going to make it through."
Yes. Yes.
Because it was tough, because it was something I'd never seen before, because it seemed like no one else understood or knew what was going on or whatever. But then, not but then, but God,
Yes.
because
Yes.
here I am on the other side of it.
I know.
Things that might have happened last week, 2 weeks ago,
Mhm,
last year, 2 years ago.
mhm.
I'm here.
Mm, mm.
And that's because of resilience.
Right. Right. Right.
Resilience is like it's like a muscle. We're all born with them,
Mhm, mhm.
but
Yeah.
what you do with it is what's going to strengthen it.
It is absolutely. You know, to your point, Dr. Tay, I love how you put that resilience. And you and I didn't get to share this with you offline, but I'll share it because I want to bring it into what we're talking about tonight. Out with the old and in with the new, right?
Mhm.
So most people know my testimony of the abuse and everything I, went through as a kid and everything. And when I decided to do the documentary about my life, I can honestly and transparently say to you that that resilience is what motivated me. So it's
Mhm.
interesting how resilience is in some of the most painful moments, as I said, but then it was my motivation to,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, to get through the abuse, to
Mhm.
do this documentary, right? So my documentary was submitted into the film festival. So it was
Mhm.
submitted, right, guys? I didn't get to tell you this offline. So it was to tell you last year it didn't hit. So I said in the beginning of the year, last year, October, Dr. Tate, it was submitted again. I submitted it. I
Mhm.
got received an email about 3 weeks ago that my documentary was accepted. Now let's go back a little further. Talking about resilience, we're talking about motivation, we're talking about seasons, we're talking about chronos and kairos, whatever.
Yes.
So I got a prophetic word that
Mhm.
was spoken over my life last October that I would be ministering to women and girls in India. Received the word in my heart, right? And I
Wow.
said, okay, God, we ponder it and we wait to see what the Lord does because,
Right.
you know how we are. We have to wait and see how God moves.
Of course.
3 weeks or so ago, I get the email. My documentary won the award and was shown in India.
My God.
Kid you not, right? So
Mm.
I woke my husband up. Listen, this is what happened last week, Dr. Tay. I got another email talking about resilience, right? Talking
Mhm.
through the trauma. The second email I got last week was my documentary won best international documentary in India. Literally I had the plot, everything. It won the best. Now it's not from a perspective of success, because I don't see what I do as success
Mhm.
from that perspective. But what I marvel at is the hand of God, and what you're saying, how God will help you establish and assess the why, and then it cause you to move out on why. So I moved out on why I was doing it. I
Mhm.
watched the hand of God blow on it, and now I'm watching the fruit of what happened in my life come to pass. So I appreciate how you can say we can go through something, right, in life that can be so painful, and then it helps you to establish the why. Another thing in the video, Dr. Tay, I want you to talk about with me. We're going to
Mhm.
take a commercial break, but I want to talk about I refuse to own being a victim. I want to talk about that, because when I say I get that from you, I get that from you. You refuse to own being a victim any longer. Listen to
Mhm.
my viewing audience. Write something in the chat. I want you to write something in the chat. Dr. Tay is going to come right back. We'll be right back with Real Talk with Jean Price. We're going to talk a little bit more about not being a victim.
I want to talk to you about a critical element of happiness, success, and overcoming obstacles: resilience, and how it's built through some of the most painful moments. Perspective sometimes requires partnership and perseverance. And understand, sometimes it gets hard, and it's tough, and it's painful. You get tired, you get weak, and when you don't know how to keep going, sometimes all the strength you need is the strength to ask others for help. I was a victim, but refuse to own being a victim. You get that subtle distinction, that difference between past and present tense? That gives us power. Power to change the way we think, power to change our circumstances, and ultimately power to overcome.
Welcome back to Real Talk with Jean Price. I have one of my favorite guests that's on the show tonight, Dr. Tay. We want to get right back into our discussion. Dr. Tay, come back and join me on Real Talk. Thank you for being here. Listen, ladies, gentlemen, write something in the chat how much we appreciate Dr. Tay for being here. Dr. Tay, I want to dive right into what we were talking about before we went on the break. And I was talking about how you refuse to own being a victim. I need you to talk about that.
You know, when the video that played during the commercial break, it
Yes.
gets me. I've heard it twice so far. And that word victim,
Yes. Yes.
because I do a lot of work with trauma survivors, and
Yes.
I'm intentional about saying survivors, because just because something happened to you doesn't mean that you have to be defined by it.
Yeah.
So I've survived a number of things.
Right.
I might have been a victim of assault or identity theft or whatever, but I survived it. I
Right.
made it through. So I'm going to speak to the now instead of being defined by what happened. So yeah, no, I'm not going to own that.
Right. Right.
You know, you can call me what you want. I'm
Right.
going to pray against that word curse, but I'm
Yes.
a survivor. I've survived. I will continue to thrive
Mhm.
because I'm speaking life into it.
Mm, mm. And I appreciate you saying that, because, and let's go a little further into being with trauma. Of
Mhm.
course, that's your expertise as well. When somebody does come to you, right, Dr. Tate, and they have that life experience. I just met someone. I don't want to go into too many details in case somebody's watching. And
Right.
this young lady's 22 years old, and she just experienced something that's so traumatic. Maybe I can ask her mom, can we meet? You and I, the three of us meet. But how does somebody begin the process?
Mm.
How do they begin? Because it was something that was done to her, and
Mhm.
she has to be taught how to be a survivor. I guess that's what I'm trying to get.
Mm.
I don't want her to, how does she learn not to be the victim because of what she went through, but to be taught how to be a survivor?
Be open.
Yeah.
You have to be open to different experiences. And I say different because sometimes the trauma, it's complex trauma. So it's
Mm,
something that we experienced over time,
yeah.
multiple times,
Mhm.
or we've experienced different kinds of trauma. So that becomes our norm.
Okay.
We don't know what being a survivor looks like because we're constantly in a state of feeling like we're not going to survive. So being open to a new frame of mind, a new mindset, new experiences, I think that's the key that unlocks the door to the healing. Because if you're not open, you're not going to go to therapy. If you're not open, you're not going to even utter the word survivor when it pertains to you. So I think openness is probably the first step.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, how can spirituality and faith, right, play a role in getting through trauma in those different seasons of life?
Everything. It can in everything in every way, always and always you can lean on your faith.
Mhm.
How many scriptures can we rattle off,
Right,
right? But
right.
I think the most important one is that faith without works
Ah, come on.
dead.
Yes.
So we can trust God, trust that God is going to heal us, and
Yeah.
trust that God is going to take the taste from us, or trust that He's going to, remove the remembrance of what happened. But if we're not doing the work for that to happen, I'm not saying that God can't do it.
Yes.
We
Yes.
serve a great big God. Like He could do it.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
He could turn this world upside down with,
That's
right?
that's right.
But we have to do our part. Sometimes that means going to therapy.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means, getting rid of certain people, places, and things. If you follow the 12-step program, that rings a bell. Sometimes we have to do our part.
Hmm.
That's one way. I think in this season, in multiple seasons of my life, I've realized that I got to do my part.
Hmm.
I might have a big test that I'm preparing for, and I trust that God is going to give me the victory. But if I ain't studying,
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And it's so important to understand that you have to be a participant. And I think, and if I, you can correct me, please, when I make this statement. In our culture, I think we might have talked about this before. Counseling seems to be something that's not acceptable, which I totally disagree with.
yeah.
How do you, you're a professional spiritually and naturally in my book, and how to deal with these things. But how do we get our culture to understand the importance of it? How do we do that?
Cry loud and spare not.
Yeah.
We have to have the conversations. Conversations like this
Mhm,
on platforms where the conversation typically wouldn't be had.
mhm, mhm.
On platforms where, it might not be well received because in the platform, it's on those platforms where I feel like you're more equipped and better
Oh,
positioned to make the most impact.
yes, yes.
You wouldn't expect to, it might be weird or people might be
Right,
concerned about ministering in a prison because of how it might be received,
right.
but the ministry that goes on in prisons, you know what I mean? So
Yes,
we need to keep having the conversations and not just having conversations about mental health and then
yes,
conversations
yes.
about spirituality.
Right,
Bring
right.
it all together.
Mhm, mhm,
Cry from the mountaintops because
mhm.
we overcome by what the blood of the lamb and the word of our testimony. So
That's right.
share those testimonies, whether it's with a therapist
Right.
or sharing them publicly, talking about your faith and how your faith helped you to get through, how your faith led you to go to a therapist, how you looked for a Christian therapist or someone who practices spiritually integrated psychotherapy.
Mm.
Have the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the word of God in the book of Esther talks about how the question was asked her, I mean, have that Esther has come to the kingdom, right, for such a time as this. Do you feel, you personally, Dr. Tay, that you have been called and chosen? Called, I had to put a pause on that for a second. Called, I really mean this, called and chosen to be the voice or to be one of the voices in the kingdom for such a time as this, because not only, and it's you and another person we can talk offline that I feel this with, your voice is something that needs to be heard.
Mm.
Your experience is something that needs to be heard, because I do feel that some people are called for the kingdom for such a time as this, to help a world understand the validity and everything of what's going on. Do you feel that? And this is not to think more highly of yourself, it's to really feel that maybe you've been called to this. Do you feel that?
It's funny you say that, the part about not thinking more highly of yourself than you ought, because when you said, "Do you feel you're called or chosen?" Everything in me tensioned up like, "No,
Oh, wait a minute.
I'm not gonna say that about myself. What are you serious?" Because that's constantly my mindset,
Yes.
because I'm
Yeah,
like, I'm just anybody who's on here who knows me, I'm just Tay.
yeah,
But when I look, it's not necessarily that I'm hinging on what's in me and what I do and my accolades, but I
yes,
look at how God has consistently performed
yes.
in my life. So those instances are what lead me to believe that
Mhm.
I'm called and chosen. And it might not be to a pulpit, it might not be to a revival,
Yep, yep,
but the marketplace,
yes, yes,
that's that's where I am right now. And
yes,
sometimes I can integrate my work, my life's work, which I believe is being a psychologist,
yes.
with my ministry calling. And man, when I tell you that is such a blessing,
Oh, come on.
the fact that like some people they have a job because they need to make ends meet and they need
Mhm,
to, meet the needs of their families and all of that.
mhm.
But it is such a blessing when your work
Yes,
is also ministry and it fulfills the needs of a job, fulfills the same role as a job.
right.
And that is where God has me. I
Yeah,
love being a teacher. I love being a professor. I
mhm.
love being a therapist and helping people in that way. And when I can infuse God into that,
Mm,
it's powerful.
yeah,
Not saying that I'm powerful, but the effects that it has on the people, the recipients, it's powerful. And when I can infuse what I do for my life's work into ministry,
mhm. And Dr. Tay, you said it. Exactly what I said in a whole nother way is exactly what you just said. And
mhm,
that's what I see. I see that in you. Like I see that's your calling, but yet it's your work and it's all intertwined. But yeah, and you're right. That's just how God does it. But I want to bring in a comment from someone that wrote, and I think this is so good. Carol Walker Hall, which I do know, God bless you,
mhm,
said, went to therapy for the first time at age 77. I was stuck after my son transitioned. Can you
mm.
speak to that, Dr. Tay?
Kudos to you. Kudos for so many reasons. One, because they're not going to mince words, there are generational differences when it comes to views on going to therapy.
Yes.
And just based on your age,
Yes.
there are people who are in your age bracket who still believe that what goes on in the house stays in the house. And
Mm,
I'm not going to no therapist.
yes.
I'm not going to be able to find a therapist who looks like me. They can't relate.
Mhm, mhm.
Or I'm not paying for a therapist. They're not even thinking about the fact that it might be like there's so many layers of
Yeah.
no and can't and won't.
Yes.
So kudos to you for even taking that leap. And I don't know if someone told you, hey, you might need therapy, or if you felt something in your spirit or in your body and your mind that
Yes.
motivated you, but there's no age. There are children who go to therapy.
Yeah.
And there are people in their 70s, 80s who go to therapy because it can be helpful at any phase of your life.
I feel like you, Dr. Tate, also to Carol Walker Hall. I say also to kudos because it does take courage and her transparency to even put it in the chat tonight. And I
Yeah.
think to I think everybody can send her a clap because it's hard. And the truth of the matter is, God forbid, I would have lost one of my children or something. Anything in life, we don't know what we would even do. So I too feel like you, Dr. Tay, that saluting her and letting her know that that's truly a blessing that she even took the leap of faith
Yeah.
to do that, because that's a
Yeah.
hard walk when you lose a child. When we lost my brother, I watched my mom, Dr. Tay.
Mhm.
It was rough. That was a hard one. And even to this day, she doesn't talk about him that often, but it is definitely a hard one to get through. Also, let's go a little further, Dr. Tay, into what we were talking about, how you mix your calling with your work and how God uses you in that. Do you see yourself as a mentor?
Sometimes,
Okay.
sometimes,
Okay.
you know, as an example, the doctor who was my dissertation chair, at certain points in your doctoral program, your professors are going to tell you, like, call me Tom, call me Jane.
Okay.
To this day, I still call her Dr. Banks. And it's part of it is cultural, like, you put a miss or a mister on, don't call anybody by their first names, but also I still just see myself in this position of learning. So yes, I teach as a professor, but I don't know. That's a heavy mantle
It
to
is.
be a mentor to someone because that means that in some capacity you're responsible, not
Mm,
responsible for like, oh, I did that.
yeah.
You're responsible. I mean, look at pastors and ministers and spiritual mentors.
Interesting. Yeah.
So if you're a mentor in the natural, you're responsible for praying for them and covering, guiding them.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, I think I've done it in certain instances, but do I see myself as a mentor? No, not often. So I've probably done it, but just I
Yeah.
don't see it.
Wow, that's good. That's what. Thank you for that, Dr. Tay. Corliss wrote in and said, I watched my sister lose two of her youngest
Mm.
daughters within 3 years. It's hard. How does and again, it speaks to what Carol was saying when you have those hard moments. You even mentioned it yourself, Dr. Tay. And how do we make sure that women and or men, but in this case, it's two women that mentioned it, how do we undergird them? Because I think sometimes people can go through and because it kind of dies down, if I can say it like that, for them, they're still going through it.
Mhm.
So how do we kind of just stay up under people? Like I'm one of those people I try to keep checking on people. My
Yeah,
life is extremely busy, but I do try to keep checking. But how can we do a better job? Because we're not perfect, but I would love to do a better job.
right.
How can we do a better job?
You do what you can when you can.
Yeah.
Because one plants the seed, another waters, and God gets the increase. So you're not going to be the only person that is supported. My hope is that you're not the only person supporting people, supporting a person through their trauma or their grief or whatever. Do what you can and pray that there's somebody else who's doing it when you can't.
I love that.
My mom is on here watching, and we're still very much grieving the loss of my grandmother. And one thing that my mom always says, even though, even before it was us, after the organ has played the last note, after
Mm,
the processional,
yes.
you
Yeah.
need people. So people are like, oh, I can't make it. I can't make it. She's like, that's okay because we need people afterwards.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's those check-ins,
Yeah.
not because you want anything, need anything, being nosy, just how you doing?
Yeah.
Or even if you don't want to ask the question, how you doing? Because you feel like it's probably obvious. The answer is obvious.
Right.
Just checking in. Do
Mhm.
you need anything? Sometimes it's as simple as meeting a basic need. That's why do people bring food?
Right.
It's a basic need that sometimes goes unmet
Mhm.
because a person is too busy handling business or thinking or crying or praying or going to support groups or whatever. So do what you can when you can
Mm.
and start basic.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's food.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a Starbucks gift card. Hallelujah. So sometimes it's a hug.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that. And you know what word came to mind, Dr. Tay, as you were talking? The simplicity of it.
Yeah.
Like you said, I said to the person that this young lady I'm working with, I said, even if it's just a phone call that I don't need to say anything, maybe you just need to cry.
Yep.
Maybe you just need to know that somebody is just sitting there next to you. Sometimes just feeling that person just there might just make the difference.
The ministry of presence.
Oh, that's it. The
You don't have
ministry.
to say nothing.
No,
Just be there.
just be there. I love it.
Mhm.
Dr. Tay, last final words that you would like to say to the viewing audience, for those that are going to listen on the playback, for those that maybe on the line just need a word of encouragement tonight. What are your final words and what are your final thoughts?
I'd say if you're going through something, it might be difficult to see the other side, but remind yourself that there's another side. When you go through, that means you're going, there's a
Yeah.
degree of movement.
Yes, yes, yes.
If you say I'm in something, that suggests that you're like stagnant.
Mhm.
There's no motion. But through suggests motion. So if you're able to see the other side, cool. If you're not, the knowing that there's another side,
Oh,
let that be your motivation to keep going, to keep pressing, keep crying, keep praying. Whatever you need to do to get through, do that.
mhm.
And do it regardless of what other people think. Now, if they're telling you, I think you might need to talk to someone because I'm noticing these behaviors, that's different.
Yeah.
But maybe, you're not going to every event because you're processing your grief. And people think, oh, well, you're being antisocial. That's what you think. That's your business. I'm gonna handle what I need to handle and do what I need to do so I can get through.
Amen. Amen. For sure. Listen, to my viewing audience, I want you to write something nice in the chat tonight before we close out, to those powerful words that Dr. Tay has definitely spoken in tonight's show. Write something that just words of encouragement. I believe even in the work that she's doing, everybody needs to be encouraged somehow. But thank you, Dr. Tay, as always, for being on Real Talk. I have an idea I want to talk to you when we go offline that dropped in my heart. And to our viewing audience, as always, we want to thank you on behalf of myself and my team behind the scenes. Thank you always for joining us on Real Talk. We'll see you next week for more conversation, more thought-provoking ideas, and guess what? More and more of Real Talk. See you next week. Thank you, Dr. Tay.
Thank you for having me.
Always.
I want to talk to you about a critical element of happiness, success, and overcoming obstacles: resilience, and how it's built through some of the most painful moments. Perspective sometimes requires partnership and perseverance. And understand, sometimes it gets hard and it's tough and it's painful. You get tired, you get weak. And when you don't know how to keep going, sometimes all the strength you need is the strength to ask others for help. I was a victim, but refuse to own being a victim. You get that subtle distinction, that difference between past and present tense? That gives us power. Power to change the way we think, power to change our circumstances, and ultimately power to overcome.